TNBS presents Saturday Night DFS Fever. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Tommy, aka Millsy. Now, I know for those of you who tuned in last night to the Friday Night Pick'em podcast, I was supposed to be joined by a couple other people tonight. They had something come up last minute, so it's just going to be me tonight. Most weeks it is going to be multiple people. But tonight I wanted to make sure we got something out for this week, so I'm just going to handle it myself. Basically, what we're going to do in this is I'm going to go game by game, and I'm going to pick each game, players from each game that I like, players who don't like, and just go game by game, position by position, break it down, and hopefully we could win some money tomorrow. But let's jump right into it. And just going to go based on DraftKings rankings. The DraftKings list for games. So we'll kick it off with Buffalo at Baltimore. Now, to me, I'm probably going to avoid this game entirely from a DFS standpoint. Joe Flacco doesn't do much for me. He decline, numbers back it up. Not a ton of weapons on Baltimore. The strength of their offense is probably their run game. I do like Alex Collins a bit. But with so many people in action this week, with Le'Veon out and James Conner playing behind him, there's just some better options even to go than Alex Collins. Quarterback for both these teams, Nathan Peterman, when he made a start last year against the Chargers, he threw 5 interceptions in the first half. I know he's played better this preseason, but I can't trust him yet, especially from a DFS standpoint. I'm all for going contrarian, but that's a bit too much for me. So I'm going to pass on all quarterbacks from this game. Running backs, I do like Shady a bit at 6K. I know I just said that I probably won't play anybody from this game, which I might throw Shady in a lineup or two, but for the most part, I'm probably just going to avoid him. I do like the price tag at 6K. There is some upside there. He's the dominant force of Buffalo's offense. Without him, they would be probably historically bad, one of the worst of all time. And McCoy's big in the pass game, which is very important on DraftKings, where you get a full point per reception. So having a running back that can get 5 to 8 catches, 50, 60, 70 yards, possibly a touchdown, and then another, then he only needs 50 to 60 yards on the ground. You throw in another touchdown there, you're looking at 20 plus points for 6K. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard to beat that this week, in that 6K price range. For me, one thing that I look at when it comes to the first couple weeks is I don't rely so much on last year unless the team really hasn't changed much, which most teams, between the draft and free agency and trades in the offseason, they make so many moves that the team's entirely different from the year before, or a team they're playing is entirely different from the year before. So for the most part, I tend to avoid getting too heavily invested in these first 4 weeks. So you're going to hear a lot of, I'll use more stats and whatnot as the weeks go on. But I'm not basing anything strictly on last year. I'd rather look at a career of work compared to 1 year. So, I'm going to, that's just my personal philosophy. I don't go too crazy the first couple weeks. So I'll probably avoid all running backs in this game. Alex Collins isn't bad. I'll probably avoid all running backs for Baltimore completely. I do like Alex Collins, but at 5,600, there isn't too much room for improvement or, for too much production there. I just think he splits time with Javorius Allen. This game could be a blowout at halftime. So I don't know. I'm just going to avoid the Baltimore run game overall. Wide receivers, again, same kind of situation with Buffalo as with their quarterback and the rest of their team. There just isn't much there. Kelvin Benjamin kind of fallen off the past couple years. Obviously, he's dealt with some injuries, but I can't trust him. Michael Crabtree's the de facto number 1 in Baltimore, but with Joe Flacco as his QB and the fact that there isn't much opposite of him, I do like Brown and Snead, and I like their future, down the road, maybe a couple weeks from now. But this game, I'm going to avoid all wide receivers from it. Hayden Hurst was just ruled out for Baltimore. So, we might be looking at Mark Andrews starting for Baltimore, or maybe a committee of people, so it's not going to be just one set person that's going to step in and kind of take over. So I'm going to avoid the Baltimore tight end situation. I don't mind Charles Clay, but at 3,500, in Baltimore, Nathan Peterman struggled in his start last year against the Chargers. I'm going to have to avoid all the tight ends in this game too. There really isn't much I like here. Defense, again, the Ravens, 3,800, that's a bit much. I personally tend to not pay up for defenses. I like to, one of my favorite defenses is in the game coming up, which I'll get to in a second, and they're pretty cheap. But the Bills at 3K, that's not bad. I just don't trust the offense to keep the defense off the field. So I'm going to have to pass on the Bills defense as well. That game's just not very intriguing overall for me. So I'm gonna have to pass on that game as a whole. Next up, we have Jacksonville at the Giants. Quarterback wise, Eli has a really tough matchup this week going against that Jacksonville defense. So I might have a lineup or two with Eli, and it's strictly because he's 4,700. And while Odell's going to have Jalen Ramsey on him, and Sterling Shepard's going to have, AJ Boye on him, there is still Evan Ingram. There is still Saquon Barkley out of the backfield. Now, I'm not saying Eli's going to go and throw for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns, but at 4,700, I might take a stab with him in a lineup or two, considering he's at home. He's got his weapon, his main weapon back in Odell. Adding Saquon is going to give him an element to the offense he hasn't had in previous years, with a running back of that caliber that is that good of a pass catching back as well. So I don't mind Eli as a dart throw in GPPs. And just to make a quick point, when I'm talking strictly on GPPs, I'm not really in. I don't play too many cash games, so I'm going to be, most of these are going to be strictly based on GPP plays. I mean, you can take them in for cash plays if you want. I'll kind of touch on that in upcoming weeks and whatnot if I hear back from some people and they want some cash game talk. But for now, it's just, this is based pretty much on GPPs alone. At quarterback for Jacksonville, I really don't trust Blake Bortles. How many times have I mentioned this last night in the Friday Night Pick'em podcast. How many times have we seen Blake Bortles 3rd and 3 with 3 minutes and 50 seconds left in the game? A first down pretty much seals the game, and he's got TJ Yeldon running out of the backfield 2 yards down the field, wide open, and he overthrows him. He doesn't have touch. He tends to throw too many fastballs. And on those short passes, you need to have some touch. So I don't trust Bortles, especially with unproven weapons. So I'll be avoiding Bortles. And Eli, I'll use as a dart throw in a GPP or two. As far as the running back situation, I really like Leonard Fournette's price at 7,100. I think he's a bit, that's a bit too low for him. I do like the Giants' defense, especially their run defense. Snacks in the middle is as good as it gets at defensive tackle. So, but I don't know if that's going to be enough to stop Fournette. He is a solid pass catcher out of the backfield, and at 7,100, if he were to put up say a 15 or a 12, it's not going to kill you. So I like Fournette this week. I'll have Fournette in a couple lineups. Saquon Barkley at 6,700. It's too tempting to not play him in his first NFL game. Now, I'm not going to go crazy with it. He does still have a relatively decent, tough matchup. I know last year Jacksonville was pretty bad against the run. I think they gave up 116 yards a game, I believe, on the ground. So I don't mind Barkley, and I don't mind being pretty invested in Barkley. I just don't know if this is the matchup I'm going to go with to have him in something like 40 or 50% of my lineup. So at 6,700, being unproven, that's a little bit too much for me. If he was, $200 to $400 cheaper, that would be perfect. So it's not a big difference. It's not going to kill you, but I'll have a little bit of him, but I'm not going to go too crazy with it. He is also coming off of an injury from the preseason, so I know they say as of now there's no plans to limit him, but he throughout the game he could feel something tighten up, or he could feel off a little bit. So we could see them limiting his snaps, or we could see them limiting his touches. So that's really my only concern with him. As far as being a rookie, that doesn't really that doesn't worry me too much. Maybe a missed assignment in that sense it would, but his play on the field and running back is one of the, I don't want to say easiest, but is one of the best made transitions from college football to NFL. So I tend to, look at Kareem Hunt last year. He led the NFL in rushing yards. It was 1,325 yards, but he led the NFL in rushing yards last year and was a rookie. So when it comes to rookie running backs, I will factor it in, especially if it's a tough matchup. But for the most part, that doesn't really faze me. Wide receiver, we are looking at OBJ at probably the cheapest we'll ever see him in his career at $7K. Now, I know he has Jalen Ramsey on him. I would highly recommend against going something like 50% OBJ, obviously. Jalen Ramsey is that good of a corner. As far as the Odell and letting people get in his head and kind of throw him off in that sense, I think that's a bit overblown. I remember, I don't know if it was last year, but I saw highlights of him and, I watched the game, but I saw they zoomed in and focused on Xavier Rhodes and Odell in specific, and the video I saw was talking about Odell losing his cool, but what it was two personal foul or unsportsmanlike conduct penalties on Xavier Rhodes, and Odell was catching everything that was thrown to him. So I think that whole Odell is too emotional and needs to channel it. We'll see, because he does look a lot more calm and seem to be able to channel those emotions better this year. So we'll see if that kind of, if he did improve on that, or if he is who he is, or who he has been, because there are times, that Josh Norman, the matchup with Josh Norman when Norman was on Carolina, that was a bit over the top. That was a bit extreme, obviously. I personally feel the refs let it get to that point. Now, I'm a big fan of letting him play, but there were some time, you had Josh Norman pick up Odell Beckham Jr. the play before he tried to lay the hit on him. He picked Odell Beckham Jr. up and slammed him on the ground, and there was no flag. So if the refs would have threw that penalty flag there, I don't know if Odell would have been as gung-ho as he was on the next play to go after Norman the way he did. It's in the past, but it's just something I wanted to touch on. So back to tomorrow's game. Odell at 7K is that's too juicy of a price tag for me to pass up entirely. I'll probably have him in maybe 3 to 4 lineups at a 20, 25. So I'll have a little bit of exposure to him, but I'm not going to go too crazy because, like I said, Jalen Ramsey is that good. Sterling Shepard at 4,500. Now, this is intriguing because if Ramsey does shut down Beckham, which is plenty plausible, then the Giants are going to have to move the ball some way other than just on the ground. And that's where I think Sterling Shepard and Evan Ingram step in. Now, AJ Bouye is a great corner in his own respect. Obviously not Jalen Ramsey, but not far off. So I think Sterling Shepard's going to have his hands full. At 4,500, I don't mind him. I do like that price tag a bit. I don't mind, again, 2 to 3, maybe 4 lineups with him in it if you want to get some exposure to that Giants game. I don't love him. Don't hate him. Again, I'll probably have maybe 2 to 3 teams out of the 20, 25 and put him in them just to get some exposure to that Giants game. I personally think the Giants win, getting 3.5 points at home, improved offensive line. improved defense. The main reason with them last year was quitting on the team because Ben McAdoo, in many people's eyes, including mine, was a piece of shit last year and lost the team. We saw Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie suspended. We saw Janoris Jenkins suspended. We saw Eli Manning benched for no reason. So I think a lot of last year's issues came from quitting on the team as opposed to a lack of talent. Dante Moncrief was an addition this year for Jacksonville in the offseason. I don't mind him. Don't hate him. I'm not going to play him. I mean, like, I don't mind him in terms of football, but when it comes to in terms of fantasy, he's 4K, which is even too much in my opinion. So I'm going to pass on him. Keelan Cole's probably going to have Janoris Jenkins on him, so I'm likely to pass on Keelan Cole. The only wide receiver I would consider for Jacksonville is D.D. Westbrook. DD's 3,900, which is a nice price tag, and is expected to be in the slot in 3 wide sets. I wouldn't be surprised if he overtakes Moncrief sooner rather than later. And I mean, we could see that this week where he could very easily outproduce Moncrief. So I don't mind D.D. Westbrook. I don't mind if you want to, again, a dart with D.D.'s fine. As far as that, no other wide receivers interest me. At tight end, Evan Ingram at 4,700, gonna have a lot of Ingram. I think he should be in the 5,000 to 5,200 range. I just think he's too talented, too athletic. We know he's playing, that the concussion isn't an issue anymore. So at 4,700, with improved weapons around him and the main focus of the defense going to be on OBJ and likely Saquon, that I really like Evan Ingram and think Evan Ingram could have a 2-touchdown day, something like 5 for 56 and 2, which will put him at 5, 10, and 12, put him at 22.2, which for 4,700, I'll take that all day. On the flip side, Austin Seferian-Jenkins at 3,200 practiced fully yesterday, so he's going to suit up tomorrow. I'm kind of torn on him. He obviously had a good year last year with the Jets. He's still young at only 25 years old. Talent was never an issue with him. It was more so getting that off the field issue settled. At 3,200, I do like him as a red zone option. I do like him as a third down option. I think he could see a decent value. I expect him to see between 6 to 9 targets. I could see him having 7 catches for 50, 60 yards and a touchdown, which for 3,200, I'll take that all day. Now, I don't love Jenkins in this matchup. Seferian-Jenkins, I don't love him in this matchup, but I do think he's playable. I will likely have some exposure to him, but if the Giants do end up putting Landon Collins on him, that worries me a bit. So if we do see him start to do well in the game, we could see the Giants try to take that away and nullify that by putting Landon Collins on him. Next up, we have Tampa Bay at New Orleans. New Orleans is a heavy favorite here. Obviously, as you'd expect at home, Tampa with no Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick starting. Fitzpatrick at 5K may not be a terrible option in all honesty. I think this game is a blowout, so I could see New Orleans going up big and then a couple cheap touchdowns. I could see something like a 302, 2 touchdown, 2 interception day, or 302, 2-1. So at 5K, it's not terrible, and he does have weapons around him at wide receiver and tight end with Chris Godwin, who Tampa's really high on this year. Still has Mike Evans, and still has the deep ball threat, Deshaun Jackson. So that's a nice trio of wide receivers, and then they have 2 capable tight ends with Cameron Brate and OJ Howard, who split time last year in OJ's rookie year. I think eventually, at some point this year, that switches to OJ Howard taking over the tight end position and probably outsnapping Brate something to like 70 to 30 or 80 to 20, just so Tampa can start to develop him, especially if we see this season, if they're 0-4 by week 4, I think they make the switch. I think they make that sooner rather than later. Brait isn't their future at tight end. O.J. Howard is. So why not let him start developing now? Drew Brees at 6,800. Not a bad price tag at all. And if it is a blowout, New Orleans has to score the points to blow them out. So with no Mark Ingram, I already expected New Orleans to be a bit more of a pass-heavy team. And at 6,800, Drew Brees is a solid play. Like I said, they're going to have to, if it is a blowout, they're going to have to score those points somehow. Obviously, a lot of that's probably going to come from Alvin Kamara, but if those are pass catches that he takes to the house, then Brees is going to through the touchdown. So it's tough because at 68, it is a tiny, tiny bit steep for this game in particular because it is likely to be a blowout. And if it's not a blowout, it's likely because Drew Brees struggles in some capacity. But I'll probably have Brees in a team or two. At running back, Alvin Kamara, really isn't much to say about him. One of the most dynamic players in the NFL. Was incredible as a rookie last season. The first 4 weeks of the season, I absolutely love him and think he's an absolute must-start across the board. 8,500 is not asking too much of him at all in terms of price. I don't think he's underpriced, but I think he's priced right where he should. So I'm going to have a lot of exposure to Kamara tomorrow, especially with, two or three, I think it's 2 actual active running backs on the roster, if I'm not mistaken. But Mike Gillislee being one that they signed yesterday, I believe, or the day before. I'm not sure, but they added Gillislee. But I'm still, Alvin Kamara at 8,500 with no Mark Ingram is a must start. The Tampa Bay backfield's a lot more murky. They drafted Ronald Jones in the second round. He really struggled in the preseason, and it's likely that he's not going to see too many snaps if the game's close. I at 4,900, it's not even, you can have him at 3,200. I'm still not playing Ronald Jones this week. And this is a huge if I play anybody from the backfield, it would be Peyton Barber. I don't like the play. I'm avoiding all Tampa Bay running backs, but if I were to pick one, it would be Peyton Barber. At wide receiver, Michael Thomas at 7,800. It's about fair. I'd say about 7,500 to $8,000 is fair for him. So 7,800. I don't mind paying that for Michael Thomas. Again, if it's a blowout, it's going to have to be a blowout. They're going to have to score the points somehow. And Michael Thomas is incredible. Absolutely incredible. In my opinion, quite possibly the most underrated top-tier wide receiver that there is in the NFL. You don't hear much Michael Thomas talk, but he's consistently up there at 1,000 yards since he's came in the league. I mean, you look at last year in particular, you're looking at 1,461 yards. That's incredible. So top in 70 touchdowns, that'd be incredible. 7 touchdowns on the year, 119 receptions, average 81 yards a game. That's, for 7,800, you're not gonna do too much better. So Michael Thomas is in play for me. Mike Evans at 6,700. His matchup kind of sucks considering he's gonna have Marshawn Lattimore on him, who's proven to be a very, very good corner. I don't want to say great yet, but a very, very good corner. But it is Mike Evans, all 6'5" of him, and he's 6,700. And if it is a blowout, Tampa's going to be throwing the ball. New Orleans is likely going to be backing off. So at worst, we could see a bunch of catches. Even if he doesn't score, we could see a bunch of catches in 100 yards, get that 100-yard bonus. So Evans at 6,700, I don't mind him. I don't love him. Not going to have a lot of them. It's going to be similar to the OBJ situation where, I do feel some exposure is good just because of the price. But I'm not going to go crazy with him. Deshaun Jackson at 46, I'm going to pass. Just not enough there for me with him. The volume isn't there. He's kind of a one-trick pony at this point. Tampa doesn't really know how to use him effectively or get the ball in his hands. So I'm going to pass on Deshaun Jackson at 4,600. Cam Meredith, I really like the addition of him. I think he's going to be really good opposite Michael Thomas. He had shown potential prior to getting hurt in Chicago. So Cameron Meredith at 44. I'll probably pass this week, but I'm gonna keep a close eye on him. So if you want to use him as a dart, I don't mind that. Ted Ginn at 43. Another one I'm probably likely to avoid. When it comes to the Saints, outside of Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara or Mark Ingram, I tend to stay away just because it's hard to predict where the production's going to go outside of their top guys. The one person I'm considering in this game on the Tampa Bay side strongly is Chris Godwin. He's been talked up all preseason, all camp, has shown out pretty well in the preseason. And as I said, the Tampa Bay Bucks, the coaching staff, the organization as a whole is really high on Godwin. And they have him listed as a starter with Deshaun Jackson, which they're not, so they're likely to start 3 wide receivers tomorrow. So I don't mind Godwin as a dart throw. I don't at 4,100 in a potential blowout where they're going to need weapons. They're going to need plays made and playmakers and whatnot. I really don't mind Chris Godwin at 4,100. At tight end, Ben Watson at 31. Love that play. Last time he had a good year last year with Baltimore. The last time he was with New Orleans, I think he had something like 72. He had a 72, 815, 5 or 7 touchdown line. I could be off a little bit on those, but he was around there. 70-something catches, 800 yards. That was his last year in New Orleans, which was 2015. While he's up there a bit in age, he's still highly productive. He was last year with Baltimore. And at 3,100, he has some upside. He has decent TD upside, especially with Ingram being out. So you have Kamara, Michael Thomas, and Ben Watson as my favorites to score in that game. So Ben Watson at 3,100, by all means. O.J. Howard, as I mentioned earlier, I like Howard quite a bit. I might have him in a lineup or two just because of the blowout potential, but it's hard because of how much time he splits with Cameron Brate, who's also at 3K. I'm just likely to avoid both of them. Maybe O.J. Howard has a dart throw in one team. Defenses, I really like the Saints defense as a whole this year. I think they're going to be a top 10 defense in the NFL. And this week, it's Tampa Bay with a ton of question marks at running back and their backup quarterback starting. So this would be a defense I'd pay up for, and I'm considering it for tomorrow. So, if you want to pay up a little bit to take the Saints, I think that's a pretty good idea. I just think they might be a bit chalky, which kind of scares me off of them a bit. And Tampa's defense, I don't need to fucking say anything about Tampa's defense. That's a full fade. Houston at New England. Obviously, we all know New England's an extremely tough place to play, as it is. Let alone having to face Tom Brady, having to face Bill Belichick, and Rob Gronkowski. So Tom Brady at 7,200, way too cheap for Brady, especially with this game. I think I had an over/under at 50.5. So I don't understand how Tom Brady's only 7,200 with an over/under that high. Same thing with Deshaun Watson at 6,700. I'm likely to load up on both of these quarterbacks tomorrow. I'm going to have a decent amount of them in all lineups. So both quarterbacks are fully in play for me, GPP and cash games. They might be a bit chalky in GPPs, so we'll talk about some potential pivots with some of these other games we get to. At running back, Lamar Miller at 5,200 is way too cheap. I love Lamar Miller just for the simple fact of he's going to be a 3-down back for at least the first 6 weeks while Dante Foreman is out. He's a capable pass catcher. He's going to be the red zone back. He's going to likely touch the ball 18 to 20 times at least. So Lamar Miller at 5,200 I really like, and I'm not sure if too many people are going to be on him this week. So I think this is the week to hop on him and hope the ownership doesn't get too high. Sony Michel, I think he's expected to be active tomorrow. I like Michel's long-term outlook for the season, but this game coming off injury, I'm going to be likely to avoid him. A couple limited practices, it just doesn't do enough for me. I could very easily see them kind of playing the Patriots games with him, and kind of just leading teams on to make them think that he's going to play, but in reality they don't really have intentions of playing him, or maybe playing him very limited snaps, but they're very mum, kind of keep that stuff close to the chest. So I'm going to avoid Michelle. Rex Burkhead at 4,200 I like a lot, and we'll probably have in a ton of lineups just for the fact that New England doesn't have any receivers outside of Chris Hogan. And Brady's always been known to throw the ball around, or spread the ball around. Danny Amendola's gone. They cut Mike Gillislee. They do still have James White. And Jeremy Hill's a capable pass catcher. But Rex Burkhead, they can move him out to slot receiver or line him up in the backfield. So he's got some diversity to him that a lot of these other running backs don't. So I wouldn't even be surprised if he lines up in the slot a decent amount tomorrow. So at 4,200, I really like Rex Burkhead. He's got some TD upside. He should see a high volume in terms of targets. The backfield is kind of hard to predict, so I don't love him, as in I'm going to start him in a bunch of lineups, but I do like his potential tomorrow. I think he's used a lot. James White, same. They don't have receivers. I could see them even doing a lot of two-back sets, lining up Burkhead in the backfield, then splitting them out wide and keeping James White in the backfield, and kind of causing some chaos for opposing defenses. So, and if you want to take a stab at White, I don't mind it, but I'd rather pay the 200 more and go up to 4,200 for Burkhead. Jeremy Hill for me is a full fade. I just think this game's going to be a bit of a shootout. I don't know how many times he's going to touch the ball tomorrow, so Jeremy Hill's a fade for me. My top wide receiver for the season in terms of fantasy points is actually DeAndre Hopkins. I was just about to say I do like him a lot tomorrow, but I'd like him more if I knew Will Fuller was playing, and if he didn't have to deal with fucking Stephon Gilmore. Gilmore is a damn good corner, and I don't know. He's not enough to stop Hopkins. He's not going to shut him down. But, instead of seeing a 12, 13 target game for Hopkins, we could see a 9 to 10 target game. That where he doesn't catch an extra 2 passes, doesn't get that extra 20, 30 yards that puts him over the 100 mark. Maybe one of them's a touchdown. So at 8,300, I'll have some exposure. In a shootout, in a potential shootout, I will definitely have a decent amount of exposure to Hopkins. I mean, the main reason, I know Odell has Jalen Ramsey on him, which is a tougher matchup, but Odell is also $1,300 cheaper. So they're in similar situations, but the price difference kind of makes me lean. I don't know, actually, because I think this game puts up more points. You know what? I'm going to lean Hopkins. I pay the $1,300 extra. I know that's a nice chunk of change, but with the shootout potential of this game, whereas the Giant game, I believe it's supposed to rain as well, or there's a chance of rain. So New England's supposed to be clear in terms of precipitation. So I'm going to definitely have a decent amount of Hopkins tomorrow. Chris Hogan, if you want to play him, it's not a terrible play. It's just, for me, that he's a full fade. Even though they don't have any receivers with Edelman out, I can't pay $600 for Chris Hogan, or $6,100 for Chris Hogan, who's that touchdown dependent. I understand that the receivers are out, but the Houston secondary is pretty good, and they have an improved pass rush. They get J.J. Watt back. They still have Jadeveon Clowney, and they still have Whitney Mercilus. So I'm gonna pass on Hogan. Will Fuller, I'm gonna pass on, even if we find out that he is playing tomorrow. Unless we find out that he's gonna be a full participant, no limitations. I can't play him. I know he's 5,100, and I love that price tag. I love this matchup, especially him opposite Hopkins, where he's not going to have Gilmore on him. It's just that injury and the fact he's practiced in a limited fashion, and being questionable, a true questionable in week one isn't a good sign. So I'm gonna fade Will Fuller. I'll give you a deep sleeper here. If you really need some salary savings, one player that I do think is going to be used a decent amount, and one player that I think has that dynamic playmaking ability is Cordero Patterson. He's been talked up a bit in the offseason by the Patriots. So, and we do know that Belichick and Brady are known to get the best out of their players. So I'll probably have a team or two with Cordero Patterson on it. I mean, you had a chance of a kick return touchdown. I don't know if he's returning punts or not, but potentially a punt return touchdown, a receiving or rushing touchdown. So there's a lot of touchdown upside there. It's just we don't know how many touches he's going to get. But with the lack of options at wide receiver, I think Cordero Patterson makes a sneaky, great GPP play tomorrow. Tight end, Rob Gronkowski is Rob Gronkowski, and he's under 7K at 6,900. He's a fine play. I'll have some exposure to him, not going to go crazy with him. As far as Houston's tight end situation, that's a full avoid for me. I don't have interest in anybody there. In terms of defenses, I think this game's a shootout, so I'll probably avoid both of them. But if you want to take a stab, just because one's the Patriots are 2,400 and the Texans are 2,200, if you get a defensive touchdown, that makes it worth it right there. So I don't mind a stab at either one of these defenses, but I'm not likely to make it a point to get them in or have many teams with them as my defense. Next up, we have San Francisco at Minnesota. Kirk Cousins makes his Vikings debut in the regular season, so 6,500 with Diggs, Thielen, Dalvin Cook back, Kyle Rudolph at tight end. Kirk Cousins is a fine play. I'll definitely have some exposure to Cousins. This game could get out of hand, so that worries me a bit about Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, if it gets out of hand, I do like him because I think in terms of garbage time or comeback mode, that Garoppolo can get some, he can get his stats up. So, but if the game happens to stay close, I don't think it's going to be like we'll say a 30 to 23 game, or I see it more of like a 24-10 type situation. So Garoppolo this week, while I like his season outlook, it's going to be a fade for me tomorrow, going on the road in Minnesota with receiving options that aren't terrible, but they're not, he doesn't have that big body target he can go to. He doesn't have that consistent threat that he can go to. So it's going to be a pass for me on Jimmy G, the porn star slayer. Dalvin Cook at 6,200. I liked him a lot up until earlier today, and I read something that they're going to take a kind of wait and see approach with him tomorrow, and that he may be limited, he may not. So this would be the game to limit him because they're probably not going to need him. So Dalvin Cook for me is going to be a fade. Latavius Murray, if you want to take a stab with him, I don't mind it because of the chance that Cook could be limited. But then again, it could just be the Vikings playing some games and trying to get in, try and change San Fran's game plan in any way that they can. So take that how you will. I'm going to take it as he might actually or probably will be limited just because of Minnesota's expected to win this game. They're at home. It's Kirk Cousins' first game. I could see them trying to get Cousins started on the right foot and have him throw 30, 35, 40 times and complete or go for about 300 yards, maybe 2 or 3 touchdowns. So I like taking the passing game a bit more for Minnesota than the running game. But Murray, I don't mind Murray. I'm just a little worried with Dalvin Cook. As far as San Francisco, Alfred Morris is a fade for me. I'm going to consider Matt Breida. especially if this game if this game gets out of hand, he's going to get a lot of usage. Alfred Morris is not a capable wide receiver, pass catching running back at all. Hasn't been in his career, hasn't really improved on it either. So if I take a running back from San Francisco, it'll be Breida, and it might be a dart throw, but I'm likely to avoid him as well. It just San Francisco just doesn't intrigue me. Both wide receivers. If Rhodes is on Garcon, I like Goodwin. I like Goodwin a tiny bit regardless. I think he could still make some noise. He could score a late touchdown. So I don't mind Goodwin. I don't love it, but if you want to take a stab with him, it's not, there's worse plays out there. But for me, he's going to be a fade, as is the rest of the running backs the wide receivers in this game for San Francisco. I'm likely to fade Thielen as well. I think with Kirk Cousins' style of play and what we saw with him and Jamison Crowder in Washington, I think Diggs becomes his number one target. And Diggs actually outproduced in terms of fantasy points by, it was 15.2 for Thielen to 15.3 for Diggs. Diggs is $600 less. He has higher volume in terms of targets, more opportunities for catching passes, and where it's a full point PPR. I like Diggs a lot tomorrow, especially over Thielen. Thielen's not a bad play. I'm just likely personally to avoid him. I just see Diggs as a better fit with Cousins. Now that's not to say Thielen's not going to have a good year, because I still think he tops 1,000 yards. I think they both do. I just think Diggs is going to be the more productive of the two on a week-to-week basis. So Diggs is in play for me. Thielen, I'm likely to fade. Kyle Rudolph at 4,500. I'm not a big Kyle Rudolph guy. And what I mean by that is he's great in the red zone. He's a good tight end. He's a very, very good blocker. He's just not used much except for in the red zone or short yardage situations. So for 4,500, Evan Ingram is 200 more. So I'm likely to avoid Kyle Rudolph. He just, at 4,500, I just don't see enough upside in a game that's a potential blowout. George Kittle at 3,300 for San Fran, not a terrible play. Again, if this game gets out of hand, he could. Tight ends are usually the ones that tend to pick up the work, get the most stats first, and then the touchdowns go to the wide receivers or the running backs and whatnot, even the tight ends sometimes. But George Kittle at 3,300, I don't mind it. He's athletic. He showed chemistry last year with Garoppolo. They've had another offseason to work together. So I don't mind Kittle at 3,300. Not a favorite of mine, but if you want to toss him in one or two, I don't mind it. Defensively, San Fran's defense, I'm good. I do not think their defense is very good at all. They didn't do much to improve it. Minnesota at home, obviously Minnesota's a top defense in the entire NFL. And at 3,500, which I don't understand how they're only 3,500 at home against San Francisco. And I didn't mention this yet, but San Francisco is going to be without Jerick McKinnon for the year. So that to me is enough to put me over on the top with the Vikings, to put them as one of the, a top 5 fantasy defense this week, excuse me. So at 3,500, by all means, load up on the Minnesota defense. Next up, we have Tennessee at Miami. Dear Lord. This one does not... this one's tough. This is a tough DFS game to pick from. Ryan Tannehill at 5,300. Not a bad price tag. Tannehill is a pretty good quarterback. Fantasy-wise, he's pretty good. He's not a very flashy guy. He's not going to go out there and most weeks throw for 350 yards or even come close to throwing for 350. And Devontae Parker's out, his top wide receiver. I'm going to have to pass on Tannehill. Mariota at 6,300. You want to take a stab with his rushing upside and the weapons around him, and the fact that Miami's defense is mediocre, and they're Tennessee's favored in Miami. So I don't mind Mariota. You want to take some stabs with him. It makes plenty of sense. I'm just probably not going to go too crazy with him. I don't trust Mariota personally. Kenyon Drake at 5,900, very intriguing. I really like the price. The only thing that kind of makes me shy away from him is the Dolphins already coming out and saying they're going to use Frank Gore a lot this year, which worries me because obviously that's going to take a decent amount of touches away from Kenyon Drake. Drake's going to be the third down back and then mix in on first and second down. It might be a little overblown what Miami's saying, but from what I heard, it was going to be a likely or near a 50-50 split in terms of rushing. So he is only 5,900, and Tennessee's defense isn't great. They are at home, so I don't mind Drake. I'll have some exposure to him. Derrick Henry at 5,400, same thing. Don't mind him, but splitting time with Dion Lewis. That worries me, and 5,400 is a nice chunk of change to pay for somebody who is splitting time with another running back, and we don't really know how that split's going to go, so that worries me a bit too. So this is what I mean by kind of taking a wait and see approach, because we saw how it's been how Tennessee has used their running backs in the past with DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry, but until I see a couple weeks and get a good feel on how Tennessee is going to split the backfield carries, I'm likely to avoid Henry. Dion Lewis too at 4,900. It's not bad. Some exposure to him isn't a bad idea by all means, but I wouldn't go crazy with it. You got to figure Derrick Henry's the goal line back, whereas Dion Lewis is going to mix in on passing downs and occasionally on first and second down. So I don't mind Lewis. Frank Gore's a fade for me. As far as Miami wide receivers, the only one that I have any interest in whatsoever is Kenny Stills. With Devontae Parker doubtful, I think obviously Amendola and Stills become next men up, so to speak. So Kenny Stills is a solid deep threat. Touchdown upside at 4,700, stepping into a number one receiver role, a decent quarterback throwing to him. I like Stills. I'm not going to go crazy with it, but I will have Stills in a couple lineups. Corey Davis at 5,600, solid matchup, potential shootout. He just hasn't shown good chemistry with Mariota yet, which is a bit concerning. Did miss a lot of last season with injuries, but steps into a number one, and he had to have shown enough to Tennessee for them to be comfortable making him their number one. So with Rashard Matthews also likely to be limited, I'm going to fade Matthews. I'm going to fade the rest of this Tennessee passing offense with the exception of Tywan Taylor. Tywan Taylor is another one of those deeper sleepers for me, so I will have some exposure to him tomorrow. I do like Cordero Patterson in terms of sleepers better than Tywan Taylor, but I don't mind a GPP dart with Tywan Taylor. Danny Amendola is going to be a fade for me. I can't trust him in more than a limited snap role. So Amendola's, I'm not going to be touching him. The only wide receiver I have interest in Miami is Kenny Stills. Tight end Delanie Walker at 4,900. I don't mind it. It's a little pricey, but Delanie Walker has shown decent chemistry with Mariota. Athletic, he's a proven veteran and gets a decent volume in terms of targets. So he's not a terrible, not a bad play by any means, but not a great play either. I'm probably going to avoid him. Mike Gesicki, if I'm picking a tight end from this game, that's who I'm going with. Miami's already come out and said that he's primed for a major role right out of the gates. He's big, he's athletic, he just struggles with blocking right now. But there's no question in his hands and his receiving ability. So I like Gesicki a lot at 2,900 tomorrow, especially with Devontae Parker down. So they're down a weapon on offense. They're going to need to replace that somehow. So I think Kenny Stills and Gesicki are a nice nice way to get some exposure to Miami or this game in your lineups. Defensively, the Titans at 2,900. I don't mind them. Don't love it. The Dolphins at 24. That's a fade for me. The Dolphins defense doesn't do anything for me, whether they're home or on the road. Next up, we got Cincinnati at Indianapolis. Andrew Luck is back and is playing. Congratulations, Colts fans and the Colts organization. The NFL is always better with Andrew Luck in it. And he's only 6,100 going up against a defense that's missing its signal caller, Vontez Burfict. He's going to be suspended for the first 4 games, if I'm not mistaken. So, Andrew Luck at 6,100. Load him up, load him up, load him up, load him up, and load him up again. I love Andrew Luck at 6,100. I think this game's a blowout. Put it to you this way, Andy Dalton is $300 less. So, give me Andrew Luck all day tomorrow. Dalton, I don't mind him as a stab. I think he's going to be pretty low owned, and he's got some upside with weapons around him and going up against a shitty defense. Joe Mixon at 61. A little pricey for me, but he's in play because of how bad Indy's defense is, and Jeremy Hill's gone, so it's Mixon and Gio Bernard. And Gio Bernard, they don't give too many carries to. So Gio's likely to mix in on third downs, a couple touches here and there. I actually don't mind Gio as a play tomorrow either. I think this game is a shootout, and Indy's defense is so bad that Gio could break. He could have something like 5 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown while rushing 5, 6, 7 times for another 30 yards, which for 4,400 isn't great, but with some of the value that's out there, he might be worth a gamble in some of them if you're doing a lot of lineups. With Marlon Mack likely to be out for Indianapolis. He's listed as questionable now, but all week it's been that he's likely to be out. Nyheim Hines is likely to fill in if he is out. Don't mind him. Jordan Wilkins too they have in the backfield, so I don't mind Nyheim Hines. I don't mind Jordan Wilkins. Sorry. Wilkins is the one that's supposed to start for me. I don't know. Hines has stuck out to me all preseason because he was a name to watch, and I completely forgot. Wilkins is the one that's likely to start. Okay, so yeah, I don't mind Wilkins. Don't love him. I just don't love this Indy backfield with Luck back. There's only a couple people I really like on Indy. Andrew Luck, T.Y. Hilton, 6,800. He led the league in receiving last year. Andrew Luck was there for a full year. So I don't mind T.Y. Hilton at 68. I'm not going to go crazy with him at that price, but he's not a bad play at all. A.J. Green at 73. Yes, please. Yes, please. Yes, please. A.J. Green's elite. He is an absolute elite wide receiver. And Andy Dalton is good enough and has a strong enough arm where he can get Green the ball down the field. And A.J. Green, doesn't matter who's on him, A.J. Green's going to be productive to an extent in that game no matter what. So with this game, with Indy having a shitty defense, I expect it to be a blowout, I expect it to be a shootout. But with Andrew Luck back, Indy's likely to score some points as well. So I like it. I do like AJ Green, and only 7,300. We're probably not going to see him around there too much this year. John Ross at 39. Love that play. Love him at 3,900. He's probably the fastest guy in the NFL, or second fastest. He caught a 72-yard bomb or 59-yard bomb in preseason. Missed most of last year with an injury. Coming into this season healthy as the number 3 receiver. Tyler Boyd is opposite of A.J. Green on the outside, and Tyler Boyd's 3,100. He's another one that I don't mind. I like all of the Cincy wide receivers in this game. I wouldn't go crazy with putting them in the same lineups or go crazy with that many of them, but Tyler Boyd at 3,100 is a nice deep sleeper. For the volume he should see for 3,100 going up against this defense, this would be the week to play him at this price point. If he stays around here throughout the year, then I think he's a nice nice, really cheap option in most weeks, depending on who they're playing. But this week in particular, considering they're going up against Indianapolis in a dome, don't have to worry about the weather, playing a shitty defense, in a game that could potentially be a shootout. I think this kind of sets up for Cincy's offense. At tight end, since Indianapolis is so weak at wide receiver, because outside of T.Y. Hilton, it's a bunch of nothing. We could see a lot of two tight end sets where they try to get Ebron and Doyle on the field at the same time. I'm really high on Ebron this year. I think Andrew Luck and Ebron are going to be a pretty fearsome tight end wide QB duo. Jack Doyle's good. He's not great. He's not overly athletic. He's not very fast, but he's pretty sure-handed and he's a reliable target. So if you want to take a stab with Jack Doyle, I don't mind it. I'm likely to fade Doyle tomorrow. I'm gonna have no Tyler Eifert, but I will have some Ebron at 3,300. And like I said, I think we see a decent amount of two tight end sets from Indy just because of the weakness at wide receiver. So Ebron at 33, I really like tomorrow. To me, both of these defenses they're not playable. You can't play either one of these defenses, especially with it likely to be a shootout. Next, we have Pittsburgh at Cleveland. It's expected to be some pretty shitty weather, mostly rainy, which doesn't translate too well for passing. And as pretty much everybody knows, Le'Veon didn't report. He's not playing tomorrow, which boosts Ben a bit, but Ben is playing on the road where the past 3 or 4 seasons he's been exceptionally bad. With some bad weather, without his go-to out of the backfield, at 6,600, I know it's the Browns, but between the weather and all the other factors, I'm probably going to fade Ben. We can go to Drew Brees for 200 more or 100 more. We can get to Deshaun Watson, who's in a much better spot. So I'm likely to fade Big Ben or Slender Ben at 6,600. Tyrod Taylor at 54. Tyrod Taylor's in play for me. I will have some exposure to Tyrod. Tyrod doesn't need, his play can translate to the rain because he's not so reliant on downfield passing or passing in general. He can take off on his own. He's plenty capable. He's fast. And he doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't force plays. If it's not there, he's going to take off and run, or he's going to throw it away and live to see another play. So Tyrod at 54 with the weapons he has around him, Tyrod's in play for me. As I mentioned, no Le'Veon, so he's off limits for me. If you read my running back rankings this week for DFS, you would see that I didn't have Le'Veon or James Conner on there. That was because at the time that I made them, we didn't know what was going on with Le'Veon, so I didn't want to go and say, play Le'Veon, or Le'Veon will be ranked as the number 3 running back or 2 or whatever. And and just in case he's not playing, John Connor's then ranked as the 12th running back. I just didn't include him. Duke Johnson Jr. at 4,700, solid passing down back. I think he's going to be a decent piece to this offense. I just don't think tomorrow's the day with the weather we're supposed to have, and Cleveland probably trying to play some ball control to keep Pittsburgh's offense off the field. Carlos Hyde at 4,500. I like Hyde a decent amount tomorrow at that price point, especially in this weather. So I think we see a decent amount of him. John Conner, old Jets fullback. James Conner, excuse me. All thrown off. I'm excited for my Jets on Monday, so you're gonna have to bear with me a bit. But James Conner, obviously taking the place of Le'Veon. Don't know if he'll get the full workload that Le'Veon normally does in terms of the passing game work as well, which isn't likely. But at 4,500 in a game where it's supposed to be pretty shitty conditions and shitty weather, you could do a lot worse. I could just see him being pretty popular tomorrow just because Le'Veon's out. So I'm not going to have too much of him. Antonio Brown at 86, he's fine. I'm not going to go crazy with it. I don't trust the weather. Don't trust Ben on the road. I think Cleveland's improved, and I think it's going to be more of a ball control type offense for these teams to try and keep the other offense off the field, because both of these teams, obviously you want your offense going against the opposing defense majority of the time, but both of these defenses, neither one is a standout defense. And both of these teams want their offense on the field, as most teams. So but with low Le'Veon, I think Brown gets some more work even with the conditions. So I don't mind playing him at 8,600, but I'm not going to go crazy with it. Juju at 59, this I love. I love Juju at 59. I think we see him kind of pick up where he left off last year, especially with no Le'Veon. Juju's also got the ability to, they'll run some trick plays with him, so he can get some rushing yards. So I don't mind Juju. Josh Gordon scares me a little bit at 5,800 just because we don't know his workload. He could be limited a bit. So, but I don't mind him as a gamble because he's a freak athlete who very easily could catch a touchdown. So I don't mind Josh Gordon. Another one I'm not going to go crazy with. I'll probably fade him for the most part, especially with Jarvis Landry at 5,500, and it's a full point per reception. And Jarvis Landry had let me see, it was 130 catches last year. 112, excuse me. But so he had 112 catches last year in Miami's offense with Jay Cutler as his quarterback and Matt Moore. So Jarvis Landry at 5,500, perfectly fine. Two sleepers, one on each team. James Washington for Pittsburgh, likely to be in the slot. I think he could have a decent day at 4K. He was college football's best receiver last year, or his last year last season, I should say, for Oregon State. So I don't mind James Washington at all. Don't mind him. I actually like him, especially considering the role he's likely to have because of no Bell. I think they could throw the ball more. And coming out of the slot, you're not going to see him going too crazy in terms of down the field. So I like James Washington at 4K. And Antonio Callaway is likely to start tomorrow. It was going to obviously cede time to Josh Gordon, but Callaway at 3,100 is way too cheap. Another deep sleeper I like. He's a bit more well-known than some of the other sleepers I've mentioned, but I'm definitely going to have some exposure to him. Again, not going to go crazy. I don't trust him, but I just think the spot, the price, and the new Cleveland Browns offense, I think he could do some damage tomorrow. David Njoku at 3,400. I like him a lot. I don't like him at 3,400. He's got to prove himself to me a bit. Vance McDonald's out, so it's going to be Jesse James getting the start. At 2,700, I don't mind it. I mean, again, I'm not really sure what to say. It's not a play I love, but I understand it, and for the price tag, it's plenty good. He should reach value. I should exceed value, excuse me. If you want to throw the Steelers defense in there, just because it's the Browns and it's supposed to be shitty weather, don't mind it. There's worse plays. The Browns at 2K actually is intriguing just because of Ben's struggles on the road, the weather conditions, no Le'Veon Bell. At the minimum, you can't go wrong. I mean, unless you're trying to pay up and you're trying to have the highest scoring defense of the week. The Browns are plenty good. I mean, they're not great by any means, but they're good enough, especially considering the price tag of them. Next up, we have my favorite game on the slate, personally, one I'm very intrigued in. Kansas City at the Chargers. The Chargers are a favorite of everybody's this year. I don't see it. I think offensively, they're very strong. I think defensively they're extremely overrated, especially with Verrett done. I don't think Bosa's likely to play tomorrow, so I think this game's an absolute shootout. Kansas City's defense sucks now. They lost Marcus Peters. Eric Berry's questionable. a true questionable, likely on the doubtful side. I just don't like this Kansas City defense at all. So Phillip Rivers is in play at 6,400. He's at home. He's got all his weapons healthy, with the exception of Hunter Henry, who's out for the year, but they re-signed Antonio Gates. Still has Melvin Gordon in the backfield. Still has Keenan Allen. He has Mike Williams healthy. Still has Tyrell Williams. So Phillip Rivers at 6,400 at home against the shitty defense is a fine play, and I'll definitely have some exposure to him. Pat Mahomes at 6K, great start. Go ahead, load him up, lock and load. Not many people in the NFL have his ability or his talents and his abilities. Former baseball player who can make any throw possible. I remember watching a game with him. I think it was about midfield. It was about the 50-yard line, and he scrambled out off his back leg, kind of like threw it like this, like underarm, as he was running, and threw it about 50 yards into the end zone for a touchdown. He's incredible with the plays he can make. A lot of that he's not going to be able to get away with at this level. But one thing about him that he doesn't get enough credit for, that's his rushing ability. He has the potential to lead the NFL in rushing yards and passing yards with the offense around him and his ability. So at 6K, Pat Mahomes, lock and load. At running back, both running backs are in play for me. At 6,900, Kareem Hunt's perfectly fine. A very good pass catcher as well as a good running back. Led the NFL in rushing yards last year. So 6,900, don't mind him at all. Going against a defense that's I think is going to struggle quite a bit this year. So Kareem Hunt's great by me. Same with Melvin Gordon. I'm going to have a lot of exposure to Melvin Gordon at 6,800. He's just too involved in the game plan. He'll run the ball 18 to 22 times a game and then catch another 6 to 8 passes a game. So that kind of involvement and the kind of production that he that comes with it. He had 12 rushing touchdowns last year. 8 rushing touchdowns, 12 total touchdowns last year. So he's involved heavily in the passing game, involved heavily in the in the run game, obviously. And then he doesn't really have much of a threat behind him. Austin Eckler, he's not an NFL starting running back. You can get away with him as your change of pace back or a guy who'll give carries to occasionally, but he's not a go-to guy or a guy that can handle a full workload throughout the season and be productive. So absolutely love Melvin Gordon, love Kareem Hunt. Wide receiver-wise, Keenan Allen's one of my favorite receivers tomorrow, just from the sheer volume of targets alone and the sheer catches alone. If he can stay healthy, he's proven he's one of the best receivers in the NFL when healthy. He can go off against anybody at any time, very hard to cover. Kind of like a slot guy that is capable of playing on the outside. He was exceptional last year in LA. Averaged 24 fantasy points a game at home compared to 14 on the road. I don't really know what else to say about Keenan Allen. It's just, can he stay healthy? And at 7,500, he's priced accordingly. That's about where he should be, but can very easily exceed that value. He's that good of a wide receiver, and he doesn't have route limitations. He can run any route. He can run short. He can go long. He's a red zone threat in the sense that he's so quick. He's hard to cover. So Keenan Allen, by all means, another one, lock and load. Tyreek Hill, I love. I just think he's going to be very popular tomorrow. But at 6,500, how do you pass on him in an offense that explosive with a quarterback, unlike Alex Smith, who can actually get the ball down the field? So Tyreek Hill at 65, love it. Sammy Watkins at 51, for me, is I'm going to have a decent amount of exposure to Sammy Watkins. He's been asked, he's not a number one receiver, which he's had to be in his career. In Buffalo, he wasn't a fit because he doesn't have that build of a number one receiver. He has the speed, he's got the look of it, but when it comes to the way he plays the ball in the air, the way he plays the ball in general, getting his head around late at times, too many drops. He's just not a number one receiver. But he's a perfect complement, in my opinion, to Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. So Sammy Watkins at 5,100, I'm going to have a decent amount of exposure to. Tyrell Williams at 4,200, I like him, don't love him. So I'll have a little bit of exposure if you want to go that route. It's not a bad pick by any means. I just like Mike Williams more. I think Mike Williams passes Tyrell Williams on the depth chart sooner rather than later. Williams is going to be running out of the slot tomorrow. He's 6'2", 6'3", big body, athletic. He was a number one pick 2 years ago. So he has the talent, he has the potential. He just had to deal with some injuries last year, but coming into this year fully healthy with a full off season to work with Rivers, I think Mike Williams is primed for a huge year, a breakout year, and I'll have a decent amount of exposure to him tomorrow. I think this is a prime spot for him. Travis Kelce at 6,400. We've seen in the past young QBs favoring their tight ends, and Travis Kelce's volume alone, whether it's Mahomes or Alex Smith, it doesn't matter. Travis Kelce's a top 3 tight end in the NFL, so Kelce's fine for me tomorrow. I'll have a decent amount of exposure to him. As far as the Chargers tight ends, it's a pass for me. I like Gates, but he doesn't see enough snaps. Kind of just a red zone piece at this point. The Chargers defense, I told you, I think personally to me they're overrated, so I'm going to fade both of these defenses tomorrow. I think the Chiefs defense is atrocious. So both of these defenses are a fade for me. Seattle at Denver. Denver is another one to me who I think is going to have a top 5 defense in the NFL. Russell Wilson is Russell Wilson, but he does have to go up against that defense. He is only 6,200, which is a very nice price tag for Wilson, especially because of his rushing upside and ability. He does have Doug Baldwin, even though he's banged up. He does have Tyler Lockett, and Brandon Marshall did make the team out of camp, so I do like the pieces they have there. So I think Russell Wilson could make some noise tomorrow, and at 6,200, he's worth a shot. I'll have him in a couple lineups just because of his upside. Case Keenum at 5,100. This Seattle defense is nothing close to what it's been. Earl Thomas hasn't been with the team. He hasn't played in a preseason game, but they activated him for week 1, so it's fair to wonder how much play he's actually going to get and how much of an impact he's going to be able to make. So Case Keenum at 5,100 is a fine play. I wouldn't go crazy with it, but if you want to get him in a couple lineups, it's a smart move to me. I can tell you right now, this run game from both sides is a full fade for me, except for Royce Freeman. Royce Freeman was just named the starter for Denver, and playing in Denver is tough, so having Seattle come into Denver with a defensive line that's not very good, not just from a pass rush standpoint, but not very good against the rush either. At 4,500, I don't think you're going to be able to get a NFL week in, week out starting running back for that price. So you want to load up on Royce Freeman, by all means. I'm just worried a little bit about his ownership. I think his ownership could be a bit on the high side. So a contrarian play could be going against him tomorrow. Picking, not playing him in your lineups could be pretty contrarian. So if you want to go with a fade, I wouldn't do a full fade on him. No way. I can't bring myself to fully fade him tomorrow. I think he's in, just from volume alone and the fact that Devontae Booker isn't too much of a threat to taking his starting spot, that I like his I like playing him tomorrow. The ownership is going to keep me a bit reserved on him. Moving to wide receiver, Doug Baldwin, 6,200. He's banged up. He's already said he's not at 100%, probably won't be this year. Fair to wonder, how effective he's going to be. But I still think at 6,200, he's worth a gamble. He's worth a shot in a couple teams. The only reason why I really not going to have too much exposure to him is because of Denver's defense and the fact he's going to have to deal with Chris Harris. So I like Brandon Marshall at 3,700 better than him. I like Tyler Lockett at 4,300 better than him. I just think they have better matchups. And Tyler Lockett returning kicks and punts also adds that return touchdown dimension as well. Demaryius Thomas at 5,700. Lock and load, too cheap, red zone threat. Hasn't shown too much of a rapport with Keenum yet, but I think that'll come once they get a bit more in-game work together. Emmanuel Sanders at 5K, way too cheap. If you want to load up on both of these receivers in different lineups, go for it. I love Sanders tomorrow at 5K. He showed good chemistry so far with Keenum. He's not relying on the deep ball. Runs good routes, pretty sure-handed. At home against a very weak Seattle secondary, fine play by me. As I mentioned, Tyler Lockett and Brandon Marshall, they're okay. Marshall at 3,700. I'm gonna kind of take a wait and see approach with Marshall though. I'm not gonna jump right in with him. He'll probably be a full fade for me tomorrow. But in terms of the $6,200 price tag for Doug Baldwin and the $3,700 price tag for Brandon Marshall, a way to be very contrarian with some potential upside, I could see going that way in a team or two, but he's going to be a fade for me tomorrow. And as far as tight ends for both of these teams, they're fades. I have no interest in either one of these teams' tight ends. The defenses... Seattle's defense to me I'm not interested. Just on the road in Denver with an improved team and a run game that's pretty strong. At least in my opinion, I think Royce Freeman is that good. I'm gonna have to pass on the Seahawks. The Broncos at 3,300, they're completely in play. I think that's too cheap. I think they sack Russell Wilson something like 4 or 5 times, maybe get an interception. Maybe can get a fumble or return a pick, and bring it to the house. So I think there's decent upside with that Denver defense tomorrow, especially playing in Denver. Next up, Dallas at Carolina. A lot of injuries in this game. Dallas can be without Travis Frederick, and I think one other lineman. I'm not positive about that. Carolina's going to be missing 3 linemen and their starting wide receiver, Curtis Samuel. But Cam Newton at 6,900 at home, it's a bit high for me. I like Watson at $200 less. I like Tom Brady at $300 more. He's just kind of priced a bit too high for me, especially with the offensive lineman that will be out, and the fact that Curtis Samuel's out, and DJ Moore is like 4th or 5th on the depth chart. Cam's going to be a little bit of a wait and see approach with me. I'm probably going to I'll fade him this week. I do like Dak Prescott at 5,500. I know he doesn't have much to throw to in the way of wide receivers, but with his rushing ability and his rushing upside and rushing touchdown upside, 5,500 is way too cheap. And Carolina's defense isn't great by any means, so I really like Dak at 55. On the ground, obviously Ezekiel Elliott's Ezekiel Elliott. Great running back, great vision. Can hits the hole with power, hits the hole with speed. So a more than capable pass catcher, and with the lack of weapons on the outside, we could see more of Elliott in the pass game. So under 8K at 7,700, way too cheap for Elliott. So I could see him being pretty highly owned though. But by all means, load up on Zeke. Christian McCaffrey at 64, one of my favorite plays tomorrow. Way too cheap in my opinion, especially with his rushing ability and the amount of passes he can catch. And with Curtis Samuel being out, they already said they want to get him more touches this year. So at 6,400, thank you. I'll load up on Christian McCaffrey. That's about it in terms of the run game for me. I'm not really interested in backups for Dallas or backups for Carolina. If I do take a running back, it's going to be one of the top. At wide receiver, Devin Funchess, $5,200, way too cheap. I know he's been inconsistent in his career, but big body receiver, showed good chemistry with Cam last year. Cam's only weapon on the outside, a good red zone threat. He had 8 touchdowns last year in full season, 16 games, but he didn't really take over and start until I believe it was after they traded Benjamin. Did he really start to take over on the outside and kind of make a name for himself? Just missed 1,000 yards. Did have 8 touchdowns. So I love Devin Funchess for the season and tomorrow at that price tag of $5,200. Allen Hurns at 47. I don't mind it if you want to take a stab with him, but if I'm taking a wide receiver for Dallas, it's Michael Gallup or Cole Beasley. Gallup's only 4K and has shown good chemistry already so far with Dak. So I usually stay away from rookie wide receivers, but Gallup seems like he's a bit ahead of the curve with everything that I've read and seen so far. So Gallup's a solid play at 4K. Cole Beasley at 36, just because of the sheer volume of targets and the lack of weapons for Dallas. That's about it for me in terms of wide receiver in that game. I don't have any interest in the backups or the fill-ins. That goes back to the needing a couple games from this season to see how things play out. At tight end, Greg Olsen at 5,400. He's in play, but he was added to the injury report for the Panthers and is considered questionable. So that's something to keep an eye on. That's a bit worrisome for me, considering he's been pretty reliable throughout his career, but has dealt with injuries in the latter stages so far. So at 5,400, I don't think you can take that gamble unless you know for sure he's playing and is playing full snaps. Dallas's tight end is a mess. I'm fading, full fade, not interested. With the 3 down linemen though for Carolina, Dallas's defense at 2,300 is worth a gamble. I mean, Curtis Samuel's out. You're down 3 O-linemen. You still have DeMarcus Lawrence, who's a double-digit sack guy. You get Randy Gregory back, who's a potential double-digit sack guy. You have you get Jalen Smith back at linebacker. So 2,300 is way too cheap for them. The Panthers defense at 3,200, I don't mind it just because of how limited the Cowboys offense is. So both of these defenses are in play for me tomorrow. Both of them have some injuries on the offensive line. So you want to rock out with either one of these defenses, by all means. And finally, we have Washington at Arizona. Alex Smith is the 5,600. I don't mind it, but I don't love it. He just doesn't have enough weapons. Unproven run game with Adrian Peterson. He had one good game in the preseason, so kind of wait and see with Alex Smith. 5,600, it won't kill you if he doesn't have a great game, but he does have some rushing touchdown upside. So I could see a gamble or two on him, but I'm likely to avoid him. Sam Bradford at 52. That's a bit intriguing to me. If he can stay healthy, he's productive. He's shown that he's a good quarterback. He just can't stay healthy. He has weapons around him. He gets David Johnson back, and he's 5,200 at home in a favorable matchup. So I will have some exposure to Sam Bradford tomorrow. David Johnson at 8,800, a bit pricey, but he is going to be the focal point of the offense. We'll likely see 20 to 25 touches. And this is another one that goes back to the kind of wait and see approach. I'd rather pay $300 less for Alvin Kamara than pay the $300 more for David Johnson. So I will have some David Johnson, but he's not a must play for me. My must play at running back this week is Alvin Kamara. Christian McCaffrey kind of falls in there, but David Johnson at 8,800. I need a week. I need a couple weeks to see how he's going to be used and how many touches he's actually going to have. Chris Thompson at 4,700. It's a little pricey. Coming off another injury. I know he's the third down back, and for the amount of time he's on the field, his volume of targets is pretty good, but I'm going to have to avoid. Again, I'm going to have to see how they use him, go over a couple weeks and see how much he's used and whatnot, because 4,700 is a bit much to shell out. I mean, you can get Evan Ingram for 4,700. AP at 47, I don't mind it if you want to take a stab at it. This game could potentially turn into a shootout, so I don't think it will, but it has the potential. AP's not really, or Samaj AP Ryan and Rob Kelly really aren't too much of a threat to AP unless he struggles that bad. But I don't mind him if you want to take a stab with him in a lineup or two, but he's not somebody I'm going to be trying to jam in or focusing on getting in my lineups. At wide receiver, Larry Fitzgerald at 6,600, going up against his Washington defense. Love it. They move him around the formation on the offense so much that he's lining up in the slot, he's lining up outside, slot, outside, left side, slot, right side, slot. So, like, it's tough for defenses to key in on him. So at 6,600, I don't mind it. I like Larry Fitzgerald tomorrow. Jamison Crowder at 5K, way too cheap for Crowder. He's not a guy who relies on deep balls. He's a possession guy. Goes across the middle a lot, lines up outside, lines up in the slot, similar to Larry Fitzgerald. And 5K, we've seen that Alex Smith doesn't really throw the ball down the field too often. So him and Crowder are a perfect fit for each other. So Crowder at 5K, I actually like that play a lot. Josh Doxson, I'm not interested in. Paul Richardson, I'm not interested in. Christian Kirk was named the number 3 or 4 receiver. I think he might be behind J.J. Nelson. I don't mind Kirk, though. You want to take a gamble with him, I don't mind it at all. But the person I really like in this game for Arizona is Chad Williams. He's had a big camp and a big preseason. You probably heard of him as a breakout potential or a breakout candidate this year. For me, he absolutely is. I think he starts this season off with a big game against Washington, and at 3,200 for a starting wide receiver going up against a shitty defense at home. Lock and load, I'm sold. So Chad Williams is not a must play, but I will have a decent amount of exposure to Chad Williams. At tight end, Jordan Reed at 4K, coming into the game healthy. Perfectly fine with that. Way too cheap for him. Going back to Alex Smith, he's not a down-the-field thrower. So Jordan Reed fits in with him well. Jordan Reed and Jamison Crowder are the 2 Washington players that I will start. So either one, you want to go either one of them. I mean, you want to go Jordan Reed. I'm not going to fight you on it. I think it's a good play, and I'm going to have a decent amount of exposure to him. As far as Ricky Seals-Jones, he was a lot of people's pick to break out this year. Last year, hasn't really panned out, but is talented and finally has a quarterback who is capable of throwing the ball down the field with accuracy. And Ricky Seals-Jones is very athletic. So I'll be curious to see how him and Bradford get along. At 3K, you could do worse. I'll probably take a stab with him in a lineup or two, but I'm not going to, again, make it a point to get him in any. For 300 more, I like Eric Ebron a lot better. For 1,000 more in this same game, I like Jordan Reed a lot better. So I think you could do better than Ricky Seals-Jones, and I don't think he'll be very owned. So if you want to take a gamble with him, by all means. Now, as far as defenses, I'm going to be completely avoiding the Redskins defense. I'm not really sure why the Redskins are ranked higher than the Cardinals in the games in Arizona, and the Cardinals actually have some offensive threats, whereas Washington doesn't. Jamison Crowder's not a home run guy. Chris Thompson can hit a home run, but that's about it. Josh Doxson, we don't even know what Josh Doxson is yet, and he's been in the league for 2 years. So the Cardinals still have Patrick Peterson. They still have a decent defense. They're at home. playing an offense that's not a strong offense, that's not an explosive or dynamic offense by any means. So the Cardinals' defense is one of my favorite defenses tomorrow, especially at the price point of 2,500 at home against Washington, whose run game is questionable at best. So I really like that Arizona defense tomorrow. But that about wraps it up. Um, couple quick things. As I mentioned earlier, most weeks I'm gonna have somebody on with me. We had some issues this week, and I didn't find out till too late. So I don't mind hopping on and doing things myself. But if there's anything you guys would like to see in the show incorporated, if you'd like me to talk about cash games as well as GPPs, or just do some cash game mentions when I'm going through the game by game breakdowns, you can throw it in the comments, or you could find me on Twitter at Millsy021, or you could go to the Nosebleed section's Twitter at TNBS021, and get at us on there. Just let us know what you'd like to see, if there's something we can improve on, if you like the show, you hate the show. I got thick skin. I'm no pussy. I'm not one of these safe zone people. So I don't. If you got something to say, by all means. Just very happy that football's back. Cannot wait till 1:05 tomorrow. Oh, 1 o'clock tomorrow. Gonna do my gonna input all my teams now. Probably get about 18 of the 25 or 20 of the 25 inputted today, and then I'll just input the last 5 lineups tomorrow morning. Got Danny Garcia and Sean Porter going on right now, about to check that out. And as always, thanks for joining me. Sorry it was just me. I know you guys would probably like to get some other opinions on things, but did the best I could, and thanks for tuning in. Thanks for taking the time out. And again, if there's anything you'd like to see or touch on anything, don't hesitate to get at me on Twitter, at Millsy021, or at the Nosebleed section at TNBS021. And you can go to www.thenosebleedsect.com and check out all our great content. We got NBA coming up soon. We cover NFL. Boxing's on there, NASCAR, and we have some WWE. So if you're into any of them, head over there, check it out. You like anything, leave a comment, or let us know what we could do better, what you like, what you don't like, by all means. But yeah, best of luck to everybody tomorrow on their teams. You want to get at me at Twitter, you want to talk football, you want to talk shit about me, by all means, hit up Twitter. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for watching. Peace.